Hello, everybody. I'm Cody Troyer.
And I'm Brent Gaster.
And we are the Hugonauts, here to review and discuss the best sci-fi novels of all time.
In 3 weeks, don't forget to join us for Mountain in the Sea by Ray Naylor, our book club book that we've been talking about in the book club over on Discord, which has been great. But yeah, let's do it in the here and now.
Yeah, what are we doing this week? What we're doing this week is ranking the top 10 best sci-fi novels of all time, as our intro alludes to. However, we couldn't decide. We had some trouble. Anyway, it's going to be 15. You're getting a bonus 5.
Bonus 5. Bonus books. Always good.
Bonus books, yes. And let's just go. Let's go to town. Number 15, The Three Body Problem by Liu Cixin. And this is a novel, the first in the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy. That brings like a very fascinating first contact idea to the table for science fiction, if not the best, and a lot of other just what it lacks in character writing, it more than makes up for in just densely packed ideas in science that are all cool.
Yeah, tons of like crazy technology. The ideas about first contact and what aliens might be like are wild. And actually, in that first book, there's one character I like, which is one more than in all the other books in that series.
I like a couple of them.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah, and the rest of the series has, an abundance of interesting things as well. But arguably, book 2
especially the
has
Dark Forest.
Yeah. Dark Forest has the most interesting idea overall, perhaps. But the Three Body Problem itself also has the flashback, the half flashback of post-Chinese Revolution.
Yeah, you get to learn a lot about the Cultural Revolution, which, like in the West, we don't all learn about, and even in China, they don't learn about anymore. But anyway, no. So it's a really, really good. I love to learn along with my sci-fi fun. So yeah, no, it's great for that reason too.
It's a good one. What do we have at number 14?
Number 14 is The Road by Cormac McCarthy, which was published in 2006 and is a novel about a man and his young son trying to survive the end of the world. It's gripping, disturbing, deeply emotional, and hopeful all at once. Cormac is not a sci-fi writer in general. This is his only book that sort of fits in the sci-fi genre, but he is for sure one of the greatest writers. That's the end of that sentence. He's so good. I think this is definitely the best post-apocalyptic novel ever written. So if you're into post-apocalypse sci-fi, you've got to read The Road. It will absolutely 100% make you cry in a good way. So, yeah.
It's devastating, but Cormac's writing is just so good. And it really draws you in and makes you feel the world he's created. And it's one of those post-apocalyptic books that doesn't make you... It's not a fantasy of like, oh, if everyone else is gone, I don't have to like do mundane stuff. I can just
no more email. Hooray! The end of the world is great.
No, this one makes you very much want to not face the end of the world. To do what you can. Post-apocalyptic is an interesting genre to, it always gets grouped with sci-fi, but we feel like it fits here.
Yeah. All right. What's number 13?
Number 13 is Barrayar by Lois McMaster Bujold, which, is our favorite of her Vorkosigan saga, her large
it's
collection.
Like 15 books, 20 books?
23, I think.
Oh my God. Yeah, there's so many, and they're all so good.
Yeah, and they're all fairly episodic. There are a bunch of suggested reading orders you can find online if you get into it, but you can pick and choose a little bit.
And you can definitely start with Barrayar. Yeah.
I think so, yeah. Barrayar's almost a prequel to one of the series' main protagonists, Miles Vorkosigan. It's about his mother, Cordelia Vorkosigan, who's the queen in this system, and there's a lot of trouble in the Empire, and she deals with that while she's pregnant with Miles and right after she gives birth. And it's a great story about kind of how empathy and emotional intelligence can be wielded as weapons against violence. And it's really compelling in that way too. It comes off as, it feels real. It's not just a kid's movie about that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and she's like she's a very talented writer, particularly of characters. So Cordelia is like an unbelievably likable character. Miles, who is the main character in a lot of the other books, also incredibly likable. There's a genre out there, people talk about competence porn, where it's like you're watching someone who's so good at stuff, it's like very enjoyable. These books are like that. They're not ridiculous. They're not like they're not like super people. They're just like very smart, good people trying to solve very serious problems. And they're so fun to watch do it. I love Cordelia. She's such a badass.
Totally. And maybe it's satisfying. That competence stuff is satisfying because it's attainable in theory. It's not like having a superpower or something that is necessarily a fantasy. It's like, I could also learn a ton about everything in theory if I applied myself.
Well, yeah, for sure. That's right. Okay. Well, another
I
book
would probably keep reading sci-fi books instead.
Well, they count. We're learning.
That's true. That's true. How about number 12?
Number 12 has an extremely competent main character who's fun to watch. This is Ancillary Justice by Anne Leckie, which was published in 2013 and won both the Hugo and the Nebula awards. You're going to hear that quite a number of times on this list. And it's a story about Breck, who used to be the Justice of Torin, a huge, complex AI that inhabited a colossal starship and all the thousands of ancillaries, like slave soldiers, in the service of the Radic, the largest of the human empires. But now she's reduced to a single body and is on a mission to kill the emperor, the head of the Radkai Empire. And yeah, it's just it's a super compelling plot. Really interesting ideas about like the intersection of AI and human bodies and human societies as well. And yeah, incredibly competent, fun main character. You love Breck, Justice of Torin. Super great to see them on this sweet revenge mission.
Yeah, absolutely. A very cool new consciousness idea to bring to the table. And I believe it's pronounced Ratch, by the way. But
this is one of those. I didn't listen to the audiobooks. Wait, so it's the Radchai?
Radchai.
Oh, you say all the okay. All right.
Yeah, it's like the rest of the names in this series, which are all say Anander Miatna I.
Yeah, the Emperor's name is that unpronounceable. My eyes just like won't read it. Anyway, yeah, she has crazy names. But that does not take away.
Very cool world building. It feels it's accessible, but it's also really new. It feels like it's a very fun new universe that she's created.
Yeah,
and she's continuing to release.
Oh no, go ahead.
Continuing to release books in it.
She just came out with the fourth one in this universe, right?
Yeah, it's not connected to the trilogy, but yeah, in the universe.
I will say just as a watch out. So this is part of a trilogy. Ancillary Justice and then Ancillary Sword and Mercy. I can't remember the order on those other two. I will say personally, I think the first book is like a lot better than the next two. The next two are still good, but they don't have like sort of the big grand scale of the first one. They feel smaller and a little bit less plot driven, but still really good characters. You're still following Breck, who's great. But yeah, just not quite as good.
Yeah. And coming in at number 11, you may have to help me out with this a little bit because I haven't read it in a little while, but it's so good that it still made both of our lists. That is Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein, his 1959 military sci-fi novel about space marines fighting the bugs. Yeah, fighting the alien invasion.
Yeah, this is the beginning of the fighting the alien hive mind insect style enemies, which there are 3 of on this list of the best sci-fi novels of all time. He really started a popular subgenre.
I'm not even sure you could call it a subgenre. It's pretty ubiquitous in the science fiction in general. It's really it's been praised for its accuracy on military and military life, which is why it rises above in this subgenre, as you put it. And it also just raises a lot of interesting questions about the way we organize society and warfare in general.
Yeah.
What's the deal? You can only vote if you are in the military, so that's the way they get people to conscript. That's a really interesting.
Yeah, it's it's written obviously like post Korea, post World War II, in like an era where it was like wars are terrible but like worth fighting. So it's different than some of the other military books that we'll talk about on this list. And it's also, I mean, it is satirical though about like the over the topness of the military and like gung ho sort of attitudes. And it has a lot of really good themes about like sort of like freedom and responsibility, like all his books do. And the last thing I would say is Heinlein, sort of similarly to Cormac McCarthy, is just like a really good writer. If you just pick up any of his books and just read a random 2 pages, like you might not necessarily love that book, but you just read 2 pages and you're like, oh, he's very, very, very good at this. There's just a crazy talented writer.
Which is, it's harder to chat about on the analysis other than, you just have to read it yourself. Trust us. Hopefully you will.
So
what's number 10?
Number 10 is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, which was published in 1985 and is a novel told through the diary of the handmaid, a young woman living in Gilead, which is an extremely repressive, patriarchal, religious society that's taken over the United States. And you explore this like very dark world through her eyes and follow her struggle to express herself, escape, or just take back any control and agency back over her life. And it's just a really, really great not post-apocalyptic, but dystopian novel. Yeah, I think one of the greats, and we've got it here on the list as like, it's the dystopian book that we love the most. So here it is.
Yeah, and like a lot of great novels, I find that great novels will have more than one thing going on, and they're doing the main message, the main thing so well that you might not even notice until a reread, or if you're really thinking intentionally about it, all the other great things it's doing along the way and pointing out. And this is definitely one of those. It also, it's written as The Handmaid's Diary. So it's a very limited scope of story, but it also, because it's a diary, it also brings up a lot of questions of authorship and like, can we trust a historical document, especially if it's just through the eyes of one person?
Cody loves an unreliable narrator.
Yeah, I do. And what's the what can we trust about what she's saying, what she's seeing, if she's writing this assuming that someone's going to read it in Gilead? So there's all these other questions that come up in reading, and Margaret Atwood is so talented that it just flows into you and becomes a wonderful story that really makes you think and sticks with you for a very long time. It's one of my favorite books ever.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, what's number 9?
Number 9 is The Forever War by Joe Haldeman, which he published in 1974. And is another one of those books you were talking about, Ray's Starship Troopers, military science fiction. This one is a little more anti-war. I would say a lot more anti-war, perhaps. It's just, it's written after Joe Haldeman's experience in the Vietnam War, and it draws a lot of parallels there about future soldiers. We follow William Mandela.
In sweet power armor. So cool.
Yeah. It's through space to fight kind of an amorphous alien enemy, and they just keep getting sent to planet after planet. It deals a lot with time dilation and the effects of relativity in space travel, which is a really cool element of it, like how society changes and how soldiers come back to a changed society where you have that in war, soldiers coming back and feeling like society is different because the theater of war is so different than culture in general, without time dilation. But the time dilation literalizes that metaphor in a really interesting way. And also, to your point about power armor, it's just cool.
It's simultaneously an anti-war novel that also is like awesome and exciting, military sci-fi.
We actually did an interview. We've done several interviews with Joe Haldeman and his wife Gay, who are awesome. And he let us know that when he received the Hugo for this in 1975, Heinlein was there and came over to him and said, "You're the only other person who's gotten the military stuff right." I hate when people write military stuff, but you got it right. So there's something there for both of those being on this list.
Yeah, the one other thing I wanted to say about the time dilation in this one is it's like, I don't know, it's a thing that like intellectually you think about, but this is the book to me that made me understand like if you take an interstellar journey, like it's a one-way trip. Doesn't matter if you go back to the planet you came from, but the amount of time that it takes to cross an interstellar distance, even at, if you can accelerate really fast, and so for you, subjective time is low, it just means there's only one-way trips in space, and it really just brings that home in a really visceral, emotional way. It's great.
Totally. And it's maybe, if not the first book, at least one of the first books that has a sensible ship system, which is the ship-to-ship combat is all computer-driven. It's
And
AI-driven.
You wrote that book in the 70s. There was books.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some people writing books today where it's like like
The
Expanse.
pilot
The Expanse,
dodges.
which we like, but it's like, yeah, the pilot's dodging the shots and calling the shots. And it's like, that's not how it'll
To be fair, the pilot is coding and putting in the sequences and telling the computer what they want out of it in the
for sure.
Expanse.
Yeah,
I
well,
think
for
that's a
some
pretty
reason
good
in the
version, too.
Expanse, they have
But-
super slow weapons that don't make any sense either. But anyway, yeah.
In general, yes. What's number 8?
Number 8 is Hyperion by Dan Simmons, which was published in 1989, won the Hugo Award, and it's 7 interconnected stories of interstellar travelers all returning to the planet of Hyperion, which is like the most mysterious planet in the galaxy. All the stories are unforgettable. Everybody will have a different favorite. Like, I personally love the priest and the scholar the most. And I like think about those stories still all the time. But yeah, they're all really, really gripping and amazing. Incredible technology throughout the book. Really great, huge, overarching mystery. And it has one of the most terrifying creatures in all of sci-fi, the Shrike, the god of pain, who lives on the world of Hyperion. It's just, there's so much to like about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's formatted after the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer. So it's each of these pilgrims telling their short story, and the richness with which Simmons, the richness he brings from literary tradition and from science fiction tradition is incredible. Like, each story has kind of its own genre of sci-fi, exploring that genre. And then there's also a lot of parallels to classic literature stories, like the plots of the short stories follow.
Yeah, like as the most
like
obvious
that.
example of that, there's a love story that involves a lot of time dilation. So that's like the sci-fi twist, but also underneath the hood, it's like Romeo and Juliet, basically.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it works really well.
Yeah, the Odyssey's in there, some other stuff. So this was my number 1 when we smashed our list together. I think it's my favorite science fiction book ever. And I also really like the sequel, Fall of Hyperion. It's very divisive because it's a totally different form. But I love when authors do that, when they take big risks and they do something different in the series, because it's the right choice. And I feel like it was the right choice in the Hyperion duology.
Yeah, but there's
Do
sort
you
of like
even
2
call
more books
2
later.
books
That's a
things?
confusing series in terms of what to
Well,
call the
Endymion
series.
and the Rise of Endymion are separate.
Yeah, but they're like, so we call those like in the universe.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, speaking of, we're now about to enter the part of the list. Like, both of us agree these next 7 books like should for sure be like
These
the
were
best.
on were on both of our top 10 lists.
Yes.
So there was a little restructuring, but yeah, this is the goods. Number 7 is A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick, published in 1997. It follows
70,
Bob
77,
Arctor.
77.
That's what I said.
I thought you said 97.
In 2023, it was published in 2023, and it's by Philip K. Dick. It follows undercover narcotics agent Bob Arctor as he tries to infiltrate a ring of, what's the super drug called again?
Substance D.
Substance D in future Los Angeles, while also using a technology, a body scanner, which makes him appear different. It's a suit that makes him appear scrambled. It's called a scramble suit, to anybody who he wants to not look like himself to. So the other agents can't tell who he is, and the other dealers can't tell who he is.
So
It's a lot of
he's
confusion.
starting to get confused also, because there's one part of his identity that's an undercover cop, and there's another part of his identity that like is a guy who does substance D all the time, and he gets assigned to investigate himself. It's crazy interesting.
Yeah, so super interesting exploration into a very visceral exploration into addiction, like why people follow into it, what they turn into, what their relationships become, and also has some crazy twists and very cool, interesting, and applicable social ideas.
Yeah.
So Scanner Darkly, I think, is my favorite Philip K. Dick.
Me too. I mean, that's why we have it here
That's
on the
true.
list.
I don't need to say that, I guess.
But yeah, Philip K. On that note, though, like Philip K. Dick, like, you know, we've said this several times, but like he's another one of those just like super, super talented writers. Strongly encourage everyone to read at least one of his books. We suggest Scanner Darkly, but like he is very, very good. Really fun to read.
Yeah. Yep.
Makes you think
right
a lot.
about that. Who else makes you think a lot?
Yes, Ted Chiang does. Number 6 is Exhalation by Ted Chiang, which is a short story collection, 9 short stories. The collection was published in 2019, and it includes the titular story. Titular? It's very titillating titular story.
Anna Ender me at I.
Yeah. Called Exhalation, which is my personal favorite sci-fi short story of all time. It's about entropy and how our brains work, but also a totally different robot universe with air pressure. It's insane. Anyway, Exhalation's an incredible short story. And in general, all these short stories, like the way I would build them is they're like the optimistic version of Black Mirror episodes, in that he just changes one thing and then explores how the world would be different if that was changed, but also like way better than Black Mirror does it. But yeah, he's really good.
And we had, I think Exhalation, we had trouble choosing between Exhalation and Stories of Your Life, his other collection. For number 6, we think that Exhalation has better short stories overall, but each collection has a novella that makes up about half of it. And Stories of Your Life is the novella in the first one, which is what the movie Arrival is based on. And that's the better of the novellas. So if you have to read both Ted Chiang's, you won't have a bad time.
You should. Yeah, he's also, like most people when they write short stories, it's like, even like some of these writers who are like, oh, such a good writer. Like you read all their short stories and some it's like, that's not that good. Ted Chiang does not do that. Everything he writes is like off the charts incredibly good. It's not, yeah. For short story writers, we've talked with novelists or writers who are like, well, the deal with writing a short story in sci-fi is you just hope Ted Chiang doesn't write one that year, because if he does, he's going to win all the awards, and he should. So it's just a gamble.
Yeah, and they're all fascinating ideas that do the thing that we assume everybody's favorite thing about science fiction, which is gives you ideas that stick with you and matter to your life forevermore. So can't say enough good stuff about Ted Chiang, but I guess that's why this is a top 10. 15.
A top 10 with 15 books on it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of, what's number 5?
Number 5 is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, which was published in 2005. It's a mysterious classic that revolves around 3 British school students. It's a little bit time jumpy, but it's basically their lives and their relationships with each other and others as they try to kind of figure out their position in the world, who they are to the world and what they are. Now, the reason that synopsis is so vague compared to all of the other ones is because Kazuo Ishiguro is an absolute master. I mean, we've said it a million times, but he's probably the best writer on this list, even above the others. His writing and his character writing and the way and his subtlety is immaculate. Probably the best living writer, in my opinion, and
I'll agree with you now that Cormac McCarthy died, R.I.P. last year. Sadly.
That's why.
So now I'll agree.
Right. Yeah, you used to say that, right? And he will just pull you into this story where you don't know what's going on, and then at some point in the story, all the twists and all the plot, the narrative tension gets resolved through just like a character overhearing someone say something random in the hallway, and all of a sudden, all the questions you have, everything floods in. Just hearing like a little bit of information that's happened to that character in a believable way in their world just reveals the rest of the story to you. He every one of his books is amazing. Never Let Me Go is the best in our opinion, and also Sci-Fi, as well as
he also wrote
Clara and the Sun.
Yeah, Clara and the Sun is good, but not as good. And then he's got some other non-sci-fi books that are also incredible, which you should also read. But anyway, Sci-Fi list.
But Never Let Me Go. Read it. It's excellent. All right, getting to it. Number 4.
Number 4 is Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin, which was published in 1969 and won the Hugo and the Nebula Awards. And it was the first win by a woman. So that's a big deal. And then she did it in such an awesome way. This is a book about gender. It was such a sweet way to break the glass ceiling in sci-fi. So it follows Genli I, the first envoy from the ecumen of the sort of collected human worlds, to the planet Winter, which is a cold, hostile world in the depths of the never-ending ice age, populated by people who are hermaphrodites. Once a month, they enter Kemmer and will become either male or female for a few days that month, but the rest of the time, they're hermaphrodites. And so that changes a lot about how their society works. Genli is trying to figure out how to interact with these people, and there's like a big, there's like a big plot that we won't spoil stuff about also, but like it's got really interesting societal ideas, super well written, big plot, and it's also very short. I don't know how she did it all in such a short book, but it's great.
Yeah, and it's got technologies such as the Ansible, the instantaneous communication technology, who she was the first, she thought of this thing, and then so many authors have just used the word Ansible to describe it since, because it's a great word and a great idea. I think Le Guin, it sticks with people because it actually makes sense that you could communicate over very long distances at light speed or close to light speed, but you can't move at that speed. So how does communication affect human hegemony through multiple systems and planets, instead of transport? Because that's much less realistic and it's slower. So how do ideas change cultures rather than military intervention or trade?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think if we ever manage to be an interstellar species, like she has that spot on. There's absolutely no way it will ever be cheap to move stuff across the stars. But yeah, ideas we can move.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also just incredibly emotional book.
Yeah, the end is really, it's like sad and great. And anyway, okay. All right, well, what's next? What's number 3?
Number 3, Snow Crash by Neal Stephenson. His 1992 cyberpunk classic that is actually an attempt at satirizing cyberpunk in general. But as satire sometimes does, he does it so well that it kind of became the seminal novel. Like maybe Neuromancer, but Snow Crash, at least they're tied, I think. And it's just so fun. It follows. It's set in future LA. It follows a man who's originally a pizza driver, the Deliverator. Hero protagonist is his name. He has samurai swords, and he
takes
drives
itself
really
very
fast.
seriously, as you can tell with our samurai sword wielding hero protagonist.
Yeah, who's also a hacker. Driving really fast through the burb claves of future Los Angeles. Stephenson creates like a corporate dystopian cyberpunk world that has been played out in so many other books and films since. It kind of, blueprinted that along with Gibson. And there's just a million great characters, and it moves so quickly, and it has a lot of cool ideas about the future of the internet. He had kind of what was the word we were talking about?
Metaverse. He coined the term
metaverse.
metaverse. Yeah, for like sort of the virtual world. A lot of the novel happens in this really interesting virtual world. It also has some really interesting ideas about sort of language as the programming, like literally like for you and I, for instance, English is like the programming language of our brain. And he explores that in a really interesting way, sometimes a little bit verbose in the middle there, but in general, really great ideas.
Yeah. It's one of those ones that I've read many times and will continue to do.
Yeah, when we covered it on the show, we were both like, ooh, we remember loving this book, but we're scared like it's not going to be as good as we remember. And then rereading it, we're like, oh, nope, still so awesome. Such a great book. Yeah. Okay.
It's an adventure. All right, number 2, really getting down to it.
Number 2 is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, which is the 1985 winner of the Hugo and the Nebula Award. And it tells the story of Ender Wiggin, a young boy who's recruited into the elite orbital battle school, where he's trained to fight against the buggers, insect-like aliens who are attacking and trying to take over the Earth. We've heard that before. And it is an unbelievable page turner. It's got the best twist for sure in all of sci-fi. And Ender is like an incredibly likable main character who's, I mean, this is another like competence porn book. Ender is off the charts smart. He's not like super strong, but he like figures out how to play to his strengths. But the real thing that makes this book hit home so hard is like, despite those other things, at the end of the day, what makes him so good is his empathy. And so it's how, even if you intend to like destroy someone, if you don't have empathy and you can't understand them, you're not going to win. And so we should all try to like cultivate understanding of other people, and that will, make us better, more understanding, more thoughtful people.
The game theory of empathy, basically.
Yeah, it's like, even if you're a just, self-involved person, maybe consider being not so self-involved. It's like, I just like love it as an argument for empathy.
It's funny because it seems counter-empathetic. It's like, well, you got to be empathetic if you want to beat the other person in this violent match. But it's an interesting point nonetheless. And there's also his siblings. There's their side story in the novel about them beginning to understand and affect world politics, which is interesting. As I said earlier about Handmaid's Tale, you often forget in a great novel that it does more than one thing. That's the thing I forgot when I reread it. And that one's worth a reread every time.
Yep. Yeah, this gets shelved in YA sometimes, Ender's Game does, but like, if you're an adult and you haven't read this, do not let that turn you away. I mean, yes, I read this for the first time when I was, 12 or 13 and loved it, but like reading it a year ago as a, 30 something, still absolutely loved it. Like, this is not a book you should be embarrassed about reading your YA, your YA stuff.
Yeah. And I think that, that moniker was invented kind of late in the game, because in theory, Starship Troopers was released for like a teen audience. It's technically YA too.
Yeah, I mean, YA wasn't even a thing until like the early 2000s, late 90s, because Parable the Sower also came out before YA was a thing, right?
Some sort of marketing deal.
Yeah, anyway.
Someone decided.
Okay, well, let's get back to what's exciting.
Okay, what's exciting? The most exciting, this was close to unanimous on number 1 between you and I. A book that we read last year, and we were like, how the hell did we not read this yet? And that is Contact by Carl Sagan, which came out in 1995 and was his only novel, though he did many, many other very awesome things with his life.
Hold on. Weird thing. You said 1995. Again, you keep saying the 90s, child of the 90s. 1985, 3 of our books on our top 15 list came out in 1985. 1985, greatest year in the history of sci-fi, turns out. How weird is that?
Yeah, I guess there's an argument to be made.
Anyway, sorry for that total divergence.
No, that's okay. I don't feel like I said 95, but I believe you. This book is it's just an awe-inspiring, you guessed it, first contact novel about humanity's place in the cosmos. And I think the reason it means so much to me is that it kind of fundamentally changed my ideas about what the concepts of faith and spiritualism mean, and mean to humanity, and mean in terms of science, and mean in terms of religion. There's just, it really broadens the perspective, and I think softens one's view on what's right, what's wrong, what people believe should be true, what people believe should be false. And it is just a really interesting exploration into what it's like to be human.
Yeah. Yeah. It really explores that boundary of like the gap where what you can prove to be true and what you're interested and curious in, like what happens at that boundary is a place where like science and faith can and should coexist. And you can still be like a very inquisitive, serious person who's asking serious questions, but that doesn't mean you can't be curious about the big ideas that are not currently answerable. And that also doesn't mean you shouldn't try to think, even if you have a very deeply held belief, maybe you should try to figure out how to prove or disprove that. And there's still a lot of value in that. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it just really pursues that boundary really well. And then also, God, it's a gripping plot.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and if you've seen the movie's great. The book is better than the movie, which is saying a lot for a movie that good. But also the ending is totally different. They totally changed the ending for the movie in a way that made the movie better. But the book like is going to have a bunch of stuff that's going to blow your mind that I wish we could talk about here. But we have a whole episode about Contact. Go check it out in the post-spoiler section. We talk about some stuff that I love and I just think about all the time. Anyway, yeah, such an incredible Carl Sagan is such a cool guy. He was a real astronomer. Like he was like the Neil deGrasse Tyson of like the 70s and 80s, like a real scientist who was then speaking to the public about science and teaching people a lot of things. Just really interesting, great guy. And I can't believe that he also wrote the best science fiction novel of all time. Just insane. Crazy guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And like so many other books on this list, there's a ton of other stuff that happens in there that you don't even realize until after. You're like, oh, wait, also, it's a really interesting way of exploring human longevity through medical treatment. I didn't even notice he was doing that. It was just kind of happening at the same time. So Contact is the best sci-fi book of all time. This is an objective list. It's not based on our opinions. There's no questioning the list. But if you do want to question the list, let us know in the comments or come join us on Discord.
Yeah, would love to hear. I mean, at this point, we're like very, very, very deep in the sci-fi canon. But if there is truly a book out there that deserves its place in this list that we have not read, we want to know about it. Tell us.
All right, man. This was fun.
It was. All right. Great seeing you. Keep reading, everybody.
Later.
Bye.